Ah, yes, it's really getting springy and such. Oh, there's apple tree blossoms and things out there. Can't really see them, but that's okay. You don't need to see everything. Response video to Modern Mystic, part of the debate series of videos, I believe. I believe that's what I'm doing. Yeah, I don't know. Camera. This is always complicated. It's these little flip cameras. Got to figure out angle, height, inclination. Dinkle. Dinkle, that's kind of a dirty word, dinkle. Anyway. um, yeah, it still doesn't seem right. I bet you it needs to go down just a hair. I bet you. Alright, that looks pretty cool. I can always go lower. Get, yeah, relax. Sun's in probably the wrong place. Alright, anyway, neighbors are certainly in the wrong neighborhood. I gotta cut the grass too. It's half a foot long. Pair of scissors, I guess. Anyway, I did take some notes, but don't know if that's going to work out. The subject is the DNA. Nick is the Modern Mystic. Sort of. I mean, there's this. It's just so difficult a subject, though. But I mean, yeah, it will disengage you from all the nonsense that can fill your brain and clutter you and distract you and make you think something that's going on here is more than what you think is going on here. I mean, it'll get rid of all the tendency or the need or the want or it's the tendency to do that. Damn neighbors, that phantasmagorical thing. I mean, you will be able to escape that if you really look at what's happened here on planet Earth. That one cell, one collection of DNA, a strand of it, came together with a cellular membrane mechanism, and that mechanism, that first cell, has turned into everything on this planet. And it did it just by reproducing, because that's what it does. It's a little reproducing machine. It just keeps reproducing. And half the cell, the membrane part, well, it doesn't do much evolution. It's really primitive and just stays primitive, because all it's supposed to do is hold DNA in a little package and have enough of a mechanism to keep it all functioning so it can reproduce, so it can collect enough proteins and pieces and make a new cell. And that's all that it needs to do. And so that part of the cell just basically divides. It basically just cuts into two pieces, and the two pieces just grow again. So it's not much more. I mean, it's obviously more complicated, but it's not much more complicated than taking a water droplet and cutting it in two, and it turns into two little water droplets. And if you can just imagine that the water droplets only let vapor in and never let vapor out, that they would get bigger and bigger until they exploded and broke into two again. So that mechanism is really crude and simple. It doesn't do any evolution of much. It doesn't have any mechanism to. And the game is really this stupid little DNA molecule that copies its entire self, alright, and gives the other one a completed copy. So obviously it doesn't have to grow or change or do anything else. It's already a blueprint. It's just a photograph. It's a mimeograph. It's a duplicate, a complete functional duplicate of the original, and it just has the instructions on how you make a colony that you will call something else. So I mean, the first cells that occupied the world, yeah, they were little individual cells, just a single cells all out for themselves. And they all reproduced from the same material, so they all were the same. And over time, through this, because of this DNA mechanism, through this blueprint mechanism, they started mutating, and they could change. And so you can imagine that they would find different environments where they would be isolated from each other, and through that isolation they could transform into something that wasn't similar enough anymore that it was compatible, where it had grown into a mechanism where they wouldn't be eating each other or consuming each other. And so then they would be eating each other and consuming each other now, because they are starting to change into different things that are competing with each other for real estate. And so then the game is on, okay? It's this competition game between these different blueprints, and the only thing that's changing basically is the blueprint. I mean, we don't change, the blueprint changes. And we technically now, that we've gotten very complicated, what we are is a complex arrangement of colony life. So the blueprint is more about how to arrange and configure different cells into different colonies that end up building this whole giant structure that we call a person, and we still call it a living thing, although we're not technically alive. Cells are alive. Cells consume and reproduce. Cells have the DNA. We don't hold any of it. We don't have any of it, and it's not in my hand somewhere or in the middle of my brain. It's in each of the individual cells. And each of the individual cells are just doing what cells have done since their first day on Earth. And that is, they just reproduce. They consume and reproduce, consume and reproduce. And through the mechanism of evolution, they're competing. And they're not doing it on purpose. It's not like they're in what they know to be an arena fighting for their life on purpose. They just happen to have to fight to survive. They happen to have tools that will enable them to maintain their structure, to avoid getting eaten, and to be good at eating. And that's all that this biology has been doing for billions of years, is creating things that are good at eating and not getting eaten. And that do this exchanging of the blueprint thing as often as is practical for the complexity of their environment. And that's always, the nuance of the whole thing, that there's all kinds of room for this variation because there's all kinds of environments to exploit. So some animals might need to eat 10,000 calories a day to maintain their existence, and some other organism might only need 3 calories a year. And it just depends on how what their metabolism is, what their active rate is on the planet. I mean, you got giant snakes that'll eat, every 6 months, one big giant meal, and that'll do them for a while. And then you got other organisms that eat complete garbage. I mean, stuff nothing else could possibly eat, and they'll metabolize it for 2 weeks or a month, to get everything they can out of it. Alright, so the real point is that DNA provides this mechanism for very rapid evolution or mutation. I mean, evolution is sort of a nice word, but it implies getting better. But all it really is a competition between a group of retards. And so it's not necessarily getting better, it's just getting a more survivable retard, a more functional for the circumstance. So if functionality, if what needs to be exploited is a cesspool, of monkey turd, if success is going to mean eating that shit, then that's what we'll do. We'll eat that shit. If that's what's going to be required to take advantage or to be able to exploit the new environment or to get somewhere. We will become anything we have to become. We will become anything that we have to be given the opportunity to become it through these mutations. But that's the point. The DNA provides opportunity for rapid mutation, because all you're doing is messing with a Morse code. All you're doing is changing a few blips and blops, and the DNA doesn't care how many defective organisms it creates. It doesn't care how many Frankensteins it makes that don't work. Alright, except for the fact that it's kind of taxing on the organism to produce a bunch of young. But some animals can create 1 million babies. What do they care? So you can have, even in all these little microcosms, you can have all kinds of levels of competition. There's competition on every level, on every, through generations of time. Like the cicadas will be out pretty soon here. They're all on a 17-year generational evolution, each generation having its own unique character, because they each evolve independently of each other because they don't mix their genes. So you have all these different little pockets of opportunity for competition, and it's just making this thing, like I said, all you're doing is feeding a mechanism, though, is just a cell that reproduces, that copies itself. That's all it does. It copied itself once, said whoops, and the whoops never stopped. It just kept whoopsing, whoops, 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 and every cell is doing the same thing, and that's all they're made to do is whoops, 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 make a copy, make a copy, make a copy, make a copy. And so, yeah, after billions of years, you can finally slow that down some, and you'll have some cells that'll hang around for a while, like a neuron or some other cell. But most cells are still just actively replaced. They're just reproducing still, and they have to be controlled, like Nick points out, through the definition of the entire colony structure, to control that reproduction, to control the interaction, to keep everything functional, so our skin doesn't just grow all over the place and take over the world, or try to, because it'll break down the structure of the organism. But theoretically, that might be the next evolution. As much as we think the next evolution is going to be something intelligent, the next evolution might actually be a blob, like in the movies. It might actually be some hideous, cancerous, like Earth cancer. Like it'll be an actual Earth cancer, and it will actually just start consuming the world. But we've sort of seen a taste of that, potato blights and different other kind of things, where a virus or a microbe, spreads rapidly through the environment because something breaks down in the system that was regulating it or keeping it back or holding it back. Because some other organism that ate it, got a virus and died, and now it has free reign and can take over. And so we've seen those imbalances. But there could be another catastrophic style of imbalance where, the skin jumps off of a human being and just starts, eating grass or something. I mean, something preposterous, but I'm just saying that there's a practical possibility of something that hideous happening. And that's all this DNA, it's all just DNA, it's all just chemistry. It's all just chemistry. It's a chemical compound that has acquired the capacity to reproduce itself. By combining with a few other pieces of chemistry, it created a mechanism that can split and transfer a blueprint, an instruction book on how to make another one. And it just keeps making another one. And when you get to the multicellular organisms, the blueprint is just describing how to organize the colony. It's just saying that these people have to live over there, the blacksmith hangs out over there next to this guy over there, and the shoemaker over there, and just says how you're going to organize the village to keep to optimize its functionality in its competitive world. And so it's just almost like two towns competing with each other, like who can be more efficient at producing a stupid widget or a clog or some other piece of crap. And it'll be survival of the fittest. And just as you have that in the economic sense, you have it in this crude physical sense. And it's all based on how you structure the town, how you structure how the people live and what people consume what, and how much they produce for what they take. How much does our brain give us in terms of functional, efficient, smart behavior for the amount of energy it consumes. And maybe you could live in an environment where your brain was working way too hard, consuming way too. You didn't need to be smart. All you needed to do was be more efficient in how you got utility out of your existence. So there can be a circumstance where there's no advantage to being intelligent, and no advantage to having a big brain that would use up all those resources. And that's certainly how a lot of life is kind of just stuck in its perfection. It's very functional, it doesn't need to change, it can stay the same way for 1 trillion years because nothing can really do it better. It's for what it's trying to do, for what it's exploiting, nothing can exploit it better. It's got the shoe shop in the right place, it's got the blacksmith in the right place, the road is made out of something really simple, everything is so efficient that nothing's going to come along and take away its industry. Nothing's going to be able to really compete with it because it's just maximized its efficiency. It's really functional. It's a good design. And those designs are out there, like the dragonfly or the crocodile or some other example, where there's just no real need for mutations. There's no beneficial mutation because it's already doing the job so well. It's already so well constructed that moving a couple of things around and trying new experiments and Frankensteining it isn't going to get you anywhere. Alright, this is probably way too long a video. Yeah, that's sort of why it's, you know, I say you have to look at the DNA, but you have to also understand the DNA, and it's complicated, and there's so many levels to what's happening. There's the level of the chromosomes, and whatever you call them, the segments, and the fact that the code is made out of such a simple structure, and the fact that it is its little bits, it's even more segmented. Its little pieces of the code itself are competing with the other pieces of code itself on the DNA molecule itself. You know, the redundancies that could be built in. You could have 5 sequences of code that are just building your feet or something, you know, and the body will just do it 5 times just to make sure you get the right kind of feet. I mean, there can be all kinds of mechanisms built into it and all kinds of spaghetti codes. Even these kind of concepts, you don't know what the spaghetti code means, but it means, you know, in programming, code that jumps from go to this instruction, and go from this instruction says go to that instruction, and that instruction says go to this instruction, and so it jumps all, instead of being in some ordered sequence, it jumps all over the place, and so it gets all convoluted, and that's why I call it spaghetti, because it gets all wrapped inside of each other. It's functional, but it's so difficult to unravel. Alright, I don't know how far to go with this. Let's see, I wrote something down here. Time for it to coalesce. Yeah, well, the fact that it does take time to also, I mean, you have to understand this minimum amount of what this chemistry is doing to really appreciate what we're part of, what we're caught up in. You know, that it's just this mechanical process. This is just chemistry, insane chemistry. Trillions and zillions and gazillions of individual cellular structures that are essentially all the same thing. They're all still that first reproducing Pac-Man, and it's just a bunch of little Pac-Mans. They just kept reproducing, they keep copying each other, and so there's just all these billions and zillions of Pac-Mans, and we're just made up of a bunch of different little structurally different, slightly different little Pac-Mans, all caught up in their environments and all forced to go down certain roads and run through capillaries and do certain things. You know, they're funneled and forced, but they're still just little Pac-Mans. If they could get free, if they could do it, they would want to just take over the world. I mean, not want, of course, but that's all they are. Is this? They're just insidious reproducing chemistry. It's like every cell is a cancer, and cancer is just the ones that actually do get free. They actually escape the prison, and we call them cancer, but all cells are doing the same thing. I think it's probably enough. Alright, anyway, so I appreciate Nick being part of the conversation and such. So yeah, thanks.